there was a lot of concentration on Museveni as a person, as opposed to the other candidates also bringing to light what they are bringing onto the table should they be elected. But moving forward, there was also the social media blackout, which all we did was maybe just mention that it's there. Okay, there's not much really could have done in terms of having it reversed. But Crispus, should we have maybe also looked at it as an authoritarian regime for them to even get to a point where they say there will be no social media and claim that it is security? How is it security based?
Well, you remember my sentiments very well last week, Michael, when I said that we are actually on the eve of an election that involves a despot on the African continent. And I think I was vindicated with time. Because when you look at the shutting down of social media, that actually spoke volumes about what kind of ideals that Museveni stood for. This is a very important aspect that should have been brought out in a very bigger way by the media, other than the other issues that have been mentioned by Clay and Gadara. So moving forward, what are the chances that as a country we are likely going to slide to that direction? I think these are critical questions that we must start asking as a country.
Okay. Gadara, on the social media blackout?
Well, I think for me, what it highlights is the power and growing importance of social media, the fact that they would actually go after it. There has been this sort of impression created that guys who are active on social media are simply making noise, that it doesn't matter. You know, but actually across the continent, across the world, you see that it does matter, and it's just a forum for citizens to express themselves, and this is what was being clamped down on. You have to remember again, and this is what I'm saying, draw the lessons. The same thing happens here, not to the same extent, but the clamping down on voices and opinions being expressed in social media, we have seen it happen here. You know, and we remember in 2007 in that election that there was a ban on even not just social media, you know, on news reporting by mainstream media when we had a disputed election, you know. So these are the sort of things we need to be aware of and to ask, how do we mitigate against this? You know, how do we ensure that if we in 2017 have a disputed election, which is probably most likely going to happen given our history, you know, that we are not suffering the same consequences, that we are actually prepared for what might actually happen. You know, we have institutions that are credible enough and strong enough to stand up and solve whatever problems.
There was a small issue with the social media blackout, actually, because I remember seeing some tweets from Uganda, like, all social media has been closed down and all that, please use VPN, virtual private networks. And actually, I think that's where probably our media should have explained to people, what is this VPN? Because in the event that we get to that place, you know, in the event that we get to such a situation, they're telling people use VPN. How do you actually go over the ban, the blackout, and actually still manage to tweet, go to social media and all that? So I think probably, yes, we need our tech editors and all that
to break it down.
What is this VPN?
Tell us by 2017, all of you be on VPN.
But what do you think of Gadara's sentiment that it would have been an opportunity also for us, even with our local media, to compare and contrast and say, fine, Uganda has had total shutdown on social media, but recently we had our bloggers arrested. We had quite a number of social media users. We had the case of Yasin Juma. You know, all those were an opportunity for us to...
Actually, it's all about all these East African regimes, if I can call them, if I can actually blame all of, barring Tanzania probably, which also it has its own share of problems, because we never get to hear so much about it because they tweet and do everything in Kiswahili.
We don't ban newspapers. No, they ban newspapers.
Sometimes they're right. I think sometimes we tend to get ahead of ourselves. But I think you know, what we should have done is, just as I tend to agree with Gadara, is that yes, we need we could have drawn these parallels and actually just ask the larger question, like, what is wrong with this East African regime when it comes to this media clampdown? Because they tend to learn from each other and they only share the worst examples, you know. You see, it's like one is a protege of the other, like, okay, fine, now I am going to learn from the other guy. Probably Museveni's idea of social media blackout was just taking forward the idea of let arrest bloggers, because most of the people actually who use social media, I mean, are the so-called the radicals, kind of, you know. I mean, everybody uses it, but they tend to see that the radicals are the ones who actually, they're not closing down social media because they were going to get positive coverage.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they were closing it down because they were going to get negative coverage. And that's the same thing that actually tends to happen here, because we tend to arrest these bloggers and these other people because we tend to think that they're giving us a bad name. By us, I mean them, as in the government, you know. So probably that's what we should be asking. Which way,
what's the common...
which way media freedom in this EAC, you know, which media freedom, because as you say, Tanzania does the same thing with newspapers. Then we had this guy, and even in Uganda also, it's been
actually, if you look at the reports of what are they called, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, etc., they do show that media freedoms in the region are actually taking a turn for the worse.
But is it just in the region? I think we also need to ask ourselves, is it just for the region, or is it actually on the African continent,
for me,
or is it even on the other?
For me, I mean, I think globally there has been a hit, especially with governments trying to shut down or clamp down on social media, mostly under the pretext of fighting terrorism. You know, but we've got to be aware for ourselves that these are our own freedoms. These are freedoms that we took 20 years to fight for, to regain after government had taken them away. If we allow them to take it away again, it will be another 20, 30, 40 years before you can recoup them. You know, it's very important, I think, for us to start recognizing the power and the influences that exist within social media, you know, and to understand that these are spaces that are there for mostly for the voices that don't get expressed or don't have an outlet in what is mainstream press and what is officially, I might say, officially condoned media. You know, because what happens is when you speak of radicals moving online, it's really because those sorts of opinions, those sorts of expressions, as again we saw with the media in Kenya this week, are not opinions that are expressed in the mainstream press. You know, and so in fact the social media tends to become a check on mainstream press and how it reports. You know, so it's actually important that that is allowed to flourish and actually is left free, because it's just citizens meeting together and having a chat.
Okay, moving on now to coming back to the country, and we have the saga that just seems to be taking new twists and turns, and that's Waiguru and the NYS saga. In fact, it's the NYS saga, because now there's so many names dragged in there. And let me start with you, Crispus, in terms of now, in light of the new revelations of the affidavit sworn by CS Anne Waiguru. Of course, we know that EACC had cleared her, and now again new investigations opened up. We do have the new chair, Philip Kinisu, coming out to say that she had been cleared of other investigations. This is now something new. Your take on what's happening so far, and maybe what is it that we have not, as the media, picked up?
First of all, Michael, I think you need to protect me, because you are letting Clay and Gadara talk too much, which is not good. Moving on to your story, I'm not surprised, and I think once again we have indicated that this is a soap opera, because the development has been very fast, given the fact that yesterday the new affidavit is now drawing in serious players in this NYS saga. But I think I want to start by commending the media for keeping the story alive, because a lot of issues have been brought out. We've seen Philip Kinisu, like you said, coming up speaking. We've seen an analysis from KRA perspective. We've also seen an expose being done by Dennis Onsarigo on KTN that answered a lot of questions that we were raising during our last forum. I think going forward, what we need to do is to ensure that we're keeping the story alive by now roping in other alternative voices, like we said. For instance, Philip Kinisu said that he's now going to conduct an audit on his own staff, and a lifestyle audit. What will be the time frames? What will it mean? And the other question that we need to ask is the multi-agency task force that apparently is now taking charge of the investigations. What are actually its terms of reference? so to speak? And is it only going to look at this matter, the Waiguru saga or the NYS saga, if you like, or it is going to take up other stories or other issues that revolve around corruption? Having said that, I think my hunch tells me that this is going to be a precedent-setting story on how the media can help a country fight corruption, because we've seen it in other democracies the world over.
All right, Clay? How can the media ensure? I mean, we can take an example of, say, for instance, Seth Blatter and the corruption that was faced. It's literally a journalist who brought it to light, and we can see that the effect is still taking place. How can we, in the Kenyan media, for example, use this particular case to ensure that we fight corruption? We keep talking about fighting corruption. Can we use this as to snowball and have that conversation?
I think, okay, fine, credit goes to Kenyan media, even though everybody, when this thing was going on initially, it was like Raila this, Raila that, Raila this, Raila that. But I think I've had even one of the guys who's being, supposedly was being paid by the gurus of this world and all that. His paper, they started this story about NYS when they came up with this, when they broke the story about CBK questioning very huge payments about this NYS saga. I think so far, I mean, in as much as we may not want to admit, I think so far when it comes to this thing, the media has been very, very steadfast in
They've kept the story alive.
Yeah, in following up news reports.
I'm sure that
I really agree.
Let him finish.
And I think what is happening now, this thing requires much more. Yes, Onsarigo has done an expose and all that. And I think even before that, there are others which have been done, because I remember one time we were at one of our editorial meetings, and one of the senior editors said, like, you know, you guys, I think we need to do deeper than this, because we could be chasing a squirrel, and actually there's a bigger thing out there. And at the time we did a series of, for Sunday Standard, we did a series of stories on this NYS. You see, this NYS saga as it unfolds. But I think right now, as more of these affidavits are flying back and forth, hither and thither, I think we need to probably go deeper. And having said that, I'm not a political analyst, but for me...
But you're agreeing today that you must go deeper.
Yes.
Because we said we need a lot of...
we need to go deeper in as much as to get more... You know, political analysts don't rely, they rely on speculation. Yeah, but we need to get more documents, talk to more people, and actually understand what actually follow this paper trail, all these things that are flying here and there and all that, and find out, like, okay, fine, how is C.S. Rotich actually linked? Because his name came up for the first time yesterday. Though you can actually, when you look back, you can actually say, well, Raila actually had mentioned all these people at some point or the other. And if you see, so it is these linkages that we need to connect the dots. And it needs a very meticulous, we need to do it very meticulously and probably very fast. Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, these politicians are going to overtake us with all these things.
Maybe before Gadara jumps in, let me just finish his trail of thought. The other thing that we need to look at, that I think is major, are the possibilities of that we could be having other NYS scandals in other ministries that we actually must...
Of course, that one has to be there, because this young lady here was in charge of devolution and planning. Was actually, that goes across all ministries. She was basically in charge of all ministries.
Yeah, but Clay, even as we do that,
yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Yeah. If there's a problem with whatever she was doing at that place, we'll have to look at this line. I agree with you that there could be NYS like scandals, or some of these scandals to do with, because the other day there was this story from, I think, State House, that we're making is about 800 million. It is probably 1.6 billion. You know? So probably it could be more. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying, like, we need to probably follow the paper trail.
Yeah. Then probably to add on what you've just said, the other important thing that we need to look at is the fact that this is a very litigious process. So as an editor, wherever you sit, you must be able to go through the facts with a tooth comb before churning out a story.
Okay, well, Gadara, let me hear from you in terms of keeping the story alive and the media, you know, being given credit.